Hey, I'm Joey Vigour. I am a indie board game designer and publisher.
Hi, I'm Jeff Siadek.
Ditto.
Ditto.
Indie. Let's talk about the word indie for a second, because there's reasons why to become indie in an industry.
Right? Indie is short for industry, right?
Independent.
Oh, okay.
Is that supposed to be funny?
No.
Do you think you're hilarious? So, I was reading an article by Opinionated Gamers. Should we be skeptical of board games that were published, or the money was raised via Kickstarter and published via these independent publishers? And I was also, well, yeah, of course, you should be skeptical of everything. Obviously, 3,500 games came out last year. That's 10 new board games a day. I mean, obviously, this is a lot. And, just 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it was more like 1,500 games a year. So 2 or 3 times the number of games that are being published. This is a big deal. This is a big difference. Obviously, they're not all going to be good. A lot of the times, I think, reviewers and retailers and board game players have come to try these new games and have bad experiences. But I guess the question is it more reliable to go through a major publisher? Like, if you're interested in a science fiction game, what is the percentage chance that you're going to like the new sci-fi game from Fantasy Flight?
I'm glad you asked, Joey. You're much more likely to get a solid product from a major publisher.
I think you're full of crap. I think you're wrong. I think you're objectively wrong. I probably like maybe a third of the games that I try from major publishers, and that it's a higher percentage with say a science fiction game from a company that does a lot of sci-fi like Fantasy Flight. But I actually prefer games from indie publishers because they're usually off the beaten path a little bit.
The thing I find with indie publisher is they have a tendency, because they don't have as much infrastructure, to not have as much editing and sort of knowledge of
rule book writing, maybe
how the things are done, that they'll do something goofy because they think it's innovative, and it ends up just being a waste of time.
But you can usually tell. I mean, they say don't judge a book by its cover. Okay, obviously some games have bad art but are good games. And some games, are better than maybe they look on the outside. But the truth is, you can usually kind of sniff those out. And if you see a game that has great art, maybe the game won't be a masterpiece, but like obviously attention to detail was put in.
But that's my point: is that a big company is going to have more money to put into great art and get it professionally.
Not necessarily. That's the whole point of Kickstarter, is you raise money. The number one game of all time on Board Game Geek right now is Gloomhaven. That's a Kickstarter game. I think one of the biggest Kickstarters ever was the Seventh Continent Kickstarter. It was like millions of dollars. Okay, maybe you're not a fan of Exploding Kittens, but you shouldn't judge the whole industry because one Kickstarter made a bunch of money. That's not a fair judge.
Let's, for the sake of argument, leave the top 10 games out of it, and then you're looking at a vast sea of games that probably most of which weren't good enough to get published by a publisher. And so somebody got good art and did a Kickstarter and limped through it and put out a game, and most of them really, frankly, aren't that good.
Okay, but that's a subjective opinion.
That's my subjective
opinion. And also, like our friend Tate Wu does a bunch of games that are, prototypes, and he publishes some of them, but he doesn't publish most of them. Every time I play a game by Tate, it's something unique and different. His brain is wired in a unique and interesting way, and I meant that as a compliment, Tate. Okay, so playing his prototypes are cool. Playing his published games are cool. They're not expensive.
I will say this. I agree that with indie games, you're able to see that personality and the uniqueness come out more. Because if you took any of Tate's games and sent them through the mill of a regular company, by the time it got to the end, it would look like Chutes and Ladders.
It's like you watch these superhero movies, and if you like superhero movies, fine. Maybe you like the cookie cutter, but I don't like the cookie cutter. And when you have the same experience over and over again, it's because it was touched by too many hands. It wasn't a singular vision. Now, it doesn't have to be this auteur game from a pretentious like hack who doesn't know what they're doing.
Was that a dig at me?
No, it was a dig at myself, actually.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to be that, but but no, you're not pretentious. You know, you are a hack. But for me, here's an example. I emailed a particular board game reviewer, and I said, "Oh, you want to review my new game?" And he said, "Oh, that sounds great, blah, blah, blah. It's $200. Okay, totally fine. It's not a trivial amount of work to play a game and write a review, especially when you have a bunch of hits at your site. He charges $200 to review a Kickstarter game, okay? Or like do a preview, I guess. Obviously, he reviews published games for free, because I guess if it wasn't free, I guess the argument is it's like a pay-for-play kind of corruption. So he reviews the games for free. He reviews published Kickstarter games for $100. So basically, he's assuming your game sucks without ever looking at it. It's akin to racism. It's akin to sexism. You are judging something just in total without knowing what you're talking about. It's disgusting, is what I think. And I don't think you should side with that side. These are your enemies.
I think this should be a free market, and if he wants to charge $100 or $200 or $1,000, then that's where he goes. And if you think that's disgusting, then say, "Oh, well, thank you."
I am. That's what I'm doing. I do think it's disgusting, and I'm trying to speak up about it right now. And part of this process, yeah, it's a free market, and you are free to disagree with what I think is reality, which is that there's a lot of really talented people who do not want to work for major publishers, which brings up my next point, which is, why would you choose not to sell your game to a big publisher?
Well, for me, my initial reason not to is because I didn't have the courage to sell my game, which of course is...
No, why are you so self-denigrating? The courage to sell your game? You created something and you made it exactly what you wanted, and then as far as money goes, you launched a Kickstarter and that raised $200 and some thousand dollars.
I'm talking 25 years in the past when I started my first company.
Okay, but now here it is. I'm sure you could probably sell the Battle Station system to a big publisher.
I have actually, since then, I have licensed a few games, Who Would Win, and I licensed Lifeboat, and so I have other companies publishing my stuff.
That's fine, and you're allowed to do that. It doesn't make you a sellout, and I wasn't trying to insinuate that. And I've got a lot of games which aren't perfectly suited to me, that I'm not super passionate about, that I would love to sell and make some money just because I'm not going to do anything with them. I have a limited lifespan. I don't want to spend all my time dealing with shipping issues for some game I don't care about. So that's a perfectly reasonable reason to sell your game to a publisher. But when it comes to something you're passionate about, something that I mean, it's so hard to do a Kickstarter. It's so hard to make a game exactly what you wanted and make it, as long as you do it the right way, you go, you get blind play testing and people trying your game and reading the rule book. And obviously, there's a lot of mistakes you can make and a lot of paths you can go down that are wrong. Obviously, Cool Mini or not, do a lot of Kickstarters, and there's a reason they do it, But this concept of saying all Kickstarter games, we should be skeptical of, I disagree. I don't think that if I play 10 games that are published from like random publishers and 10 games that were Kickstarter games, I honestly probably like the Kickstarter games more, especially if it's like a $40, $50 game where a lot of work had to go into working on it.
I feel like there's so many games out there that I couldn't even begin to make those kinds of percentage guesses. That there's stuff that I play that's a Kickstarter, stuff that I play that I didn't know was a Kickstarter, and I like some stuff and I don't like others. I think just as a rule of thumb, if you're going to go see a Hollywood blockbuster, you're probably going to get the cookie cutter, which I know you...
Okay, so we agree. So I thought you were disagreeing.
Well, but the cookie cutter's probably going to deliver... it'll have the right music at the right moments.
It'll deliver what you expect. That's the difference. I don't want something I expect. I want to be surprised. I want to be intrigued. Kickstarter games, yeah, there's bad ones. There's bad games. There's lots of copies. You can tell which games are going to be bad by looking at them. And if you are too lazy, you say, oh, that's pretty art, or oh, I like miniatures, I'm going to buy that game. Well, then I'm sorry, but you were lazy. That's your fault as a consumer for not investigating. But don't tell me that games in general, from dedicated creative forces that decided to sacrifice all their happiness to put themselves through this gauntlet of misery to create this game and then publish it themselves, they didn't do it because publishers turned them down. No, they did it because maybe they wanted to sell to a publisher and decided not to, or maybe they wanted to and didn't know how. But it wasn't because they're a loser and their game sucks. That's just not the reality.
I think that's a fair thing to say, that it's not because they're a loser and their game sucks. I will also say that sometimes some of those games suck.
Okay, well, we agree on something. Have a great day, and go out there and publish your own games, guys.
I continue to be Jeff Siadek.
And I continue to be Joey Vigour.